The first time the gate opened itself, every man standing post swore the lock was still closed. We heard it before we saw it. Metal teeth grinding against metal. A hard clack that cut through the drizzle and the murmur of the prisoners on the far side of the wire. The kind of sound a man makes when he's angry and done pretending he isn't. I was halfway through a lucky strike under my poncho, rain ticking on the canvas, when the gate chains jolted once, like something big had leaned on them from the inside. "Harper, you hear that?" Martinez shifted his carbine to his other shoulder. He always swore the sling left a permanent groove in his collarbone. "I heard it," I said. "I ain't deaf." We all turned the same way at once. Tower 1. Floodlight bleeding across the mud, barbed wire glistening. The double gate that separated Compound B from the road rocked once in its hinges, just enough for the padlock to flash in the light as it twisted. The lock was still closed. "Wind," Kowalski muttered above us from the tower. His boots creaked on the planks. Or the ground settling. The air was flat. No wind, just low clouds pressing down, and the smell of damp uniforms and wet burlap. The prisoners huddled under their lean-tos and tent halves, a gray mass in gray rain behind the wire. None of them moved for the gate. None of them even looked at it. Only one figure stood close to it. A man in a field gray greatcoat, with the collar up and his cap pulled low, hands folded behind his back like he was on parade. The light hit his face sideways, but his eyes caught it wrong, like glass in a picture frame. He didn't blink. "Who's that?" Martinez asked. He tapped Ash over the duckboards, eyes narrowing. "We don't post any of them that close at night. Guard detail maybe," I said. "German compliment. German guards are in block 3. Kowalski called down. Lights out 2000. "You signed the roster, Sarge. You checked them." I had checked them. 27 German camp guards and staff, stripped of their old armbands and insignia, kept separate from their former prisoners by 2 rows of wire, all present at last roll call, all accounted for when I locked their gate and walked the line, counting my own postguards by habit and touch, rifle, sling, helmet, face. The figure by the outer gate stood too straight. His greatcoat looked dry. "Hey." Martinez cupped his hands to his mouth. "Zurich, get the hell off the fence." The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. Rain slid down the bars between us. "Harper." Martinez's voice dipped. "His coat. You see that?" I saw it. No water on the shoulders. No dark patches around the hem. The fabric lay smooth and clean, like it had just come out of a depot crate instead of 3 days of hard rain in a converted German camp in the hills east of Koblenz. "Maybe he just came out," I said. "The inner gate's still locked," Kowalski said, slower now. "I can see it from up here. Nobody opened it. Nobody went through." The outer gate clacked again, a short, sharp jerk that rattled the chain. I stepped closer. My boots sank half an inch into the churned mud. Cold leaked up my legs through wet wool. I kept my hand on the sling of my Thompson and watched the padlock. The chain twisted once, all on its own. Then the figure behind it smiled with someone else's mouth. I recognized the teeth. A front one chipped, 2 slightly crooked. I'd seen that smile as Martinez joked with the mess sergeant over bad coffee that morning. I'd seen it from the other side, at my elbow, turned toward me. Now it was behind the wire, on a gray-coated figure whose face didn't match the jaw. "Okay," Martinez said under his breath. "That's not funny." He stepped up next to me. I smelled damp canvas, stale sweat, tobacco. My heart pounded against the buttplate of my Thompson, and the beat didn't match the distant artillery thunder we'd been hearing all week from the east. The figure lifted one hand, slow and formal, like a man raising a gate baton for a convoy. Then the floodlight flickered, clicked off, and the last thing I saw in that brief flash before the dark was that the padlock had turned upside down on the chain, the way it would hang if the gate were open. We heard the inner gate slam from across the compound. A hard, final, steel-on-steel crash. Someone inside Compound C started shouting in German. By the time the tower light came back, the man in the greatcoat was gone. The outer gate was shut. The padlock hung the right way up. The chain lay limp and ordinary, wet with rain, cold and solid, when I reached out and slapped it with my palm. "See," Kowalski called, trying to sound bored and landing somewhere near hoarse. "Just the wiring on this crowd tower." I told command we needed an electrician. Martinez stared at my hand on the chain, then at the empty space behind the gate. "Yeah?" he said. "Just the wiring." He crushed his cigarette out on the duckboards, grinding his heel on the glowing ember until it smeared into black. The mud still held 4 sets of boots near the gate. 2 were mine and Martinez's. 1 was a half-print where I'd shifted my weight. The 4th set stood closer to the wire, turned slightly inward as if they had been facing the camp. The tread was German. The spacing was wrong, too narrow and precise to belong to any of the men we'd marched through that day. Those prints were dry. We found out about the legend the next afternoon, when the old woman came up the road with a sack of potatoes over her shoulder and a rosary wound 3 times around her wrist. The camp had been a German prisoner of war cage once, for Russian and Polish laborers dragged in through those same gates. Before that, the locals said, the hill had been a place where debtors and thieves were locked in timber pens under the open sky, while their families pleaded with the priest. And before that, long before the railroad, before the Kaisers, and the road, and the wire, there had been standing stones on the ridge, and a man with a broken jaw who sat by the gate of a wooden stockade and took names on a board he never stopped writing. They didn't tell us all of it at once, no one ever does. Her name was Frau Ritter, Anneliese. She had 2 missing sons and no patience for our paperwork. She hissed when she saw the German camp guards penned behind their corner of wire, all of them in their faded field gray. Collar patches stripped off by our guys, their faces pale and watchful under soft caps. "You keep them here," she said in slow, careful German, jabbing a finger toward the inner fence. Her eyes were watery but sharp. "And them." She waved toward the main compound, where 1,000 ragged men in captured uniforms clustered around their shelters. "On the same hill. You Americans are children." "I'm 30, Martinez muttered, not quietly enough. "Lady, I got more years than you got teeth." She ignored him and fixed on me. I had the white MP band. I had the clipboard. In any uniform, the man with the board is the one people talk to. "There is a man who keeps count," she said. "Here, on this hill. Always. I keep count," I said. "That's my job." She smiled in a way that didn't feel like an answer. Her rosary clicked as she shifted the sack on her shoulder. The beads were worn almost smooth, silver rubbed thin on the crucifix. "You change the uniforms," she said. "You change the flags. You always think that changes the number. It does not. This ground is... what is the word?" She fumbled in her apron pocket, pulled out a folded scrap of paper covered in neat, faded handwriting. "Mein Enkel, my grandson. He write the English for me." She squinted. "Reciprocal." Martinez lifted an eyebrow. "Your grandson's English is better than mine, lady. The debt goes both ways," she went on. "The ones with the rifles, the ones behind the fence. They change places. Nights like last night, the gate remembers. You should not lock both sides in at the same time. It is impolite." "Impolite," Kowalski repeated from the shade of the gate shack, flipping his helmet off and scratching the back of his head. "That's one word for it. We're following Ito policy, ma'am," I said. "Temporary enclosure, non-fraternization. All personnel and prisoners secured until further orders from corps. That's regulation." Her gaze dropped to my paperwork, my columns of names, the neat lines of ink. "You write them down," she murmured. "You put them in boxes. There are other lists, older than your regulations. No ink, no paper." She tapped her temple once, then laid the same finger on the wet earth near the gate. "Here, and here. On this hill. The man who writes the old list does not like when the ones with the rifles think they are not on it." She left the potatoes. Command liked to see us being nice with the locals. On her way out, She crossed herself 3 times as she passed under the open gate. I watched her lips move. She did not look at the prisoners, not at the German guards behind their extra wire, not even at our sentries. She only looked at the lock. After she was gone, we found a small object on the inside of the fence, half buried in the mud, where prisoners shuffled back and forth. It was a piece of stone, roughly egg-shaped, with a notch worn in one side, like a thumbprint, and a ring of lines carved around its middle. The grooves were darkened with something that wasn't mud. Some pagan crap, Kowalski said, tossing it from palm to palm. They all got their little charms, Sarge. Russians, Krauts, Poles, you know. Whatever gets them through the night. Drop it, I said. He grinned like he thought I was joking, then saw my face and sobered. He flicked the stone back through the wire. It landed with a flat sound near a line of boots. One of the German prisoners bent, picked it up, and slipped it into his pocket without looking at us. That night, the rain stopped. The cold didn't. I was Corporal Thomas Harper, 793rd Military Police Battalion, attached to the 89th Infantry Division for occupation duties. The war was almost over. Everyone said so. The radio talked about rivers crossed, cities taken, flags hauled down. We had our own little piece of Germany ringed with wire and floodlights. A concrete guardhouse that used to belong to the Wehrmacht. A yard that used to hold Russian prisoners and was now packed with German enlisted NCOs, a handful of officers, and a separate cage for any man who'd ever worn a Totenkopf or Camp Triangle. The rumor was we were supposed to move the SS types somewhere else, somewhere with heavier wire and Americans on every tower. There weren't enough trucks. There were never enough trucks. So they sat there on their boards and straw, staring at us through 2 rows of barbed wire, while the men they used to beat lined up for watery soup 50 yards away. Hell of a joke, Martinez said. His real name was Leonardo Martinez, El Paso, Texas. He rolled his sleeves above his forearms, even when it was cold, and chewed the filters off his cigarettes before he lit them. Karma, right? Or whatever the Kraut word for it is. Little bit of justice on this damn hill. I'll believe in justice when they feed our guys better than theirs, Kowalski said, watching the supply truck grind up the road with another load of burlap sacks. Mess says we're on half rations until Corps figures out the numbers. The cooks worked with what they had. The prisoners learned fast to eat everything, even the gray lumps floating in the bottom of the pot. At night, the camp smelled like boiled cabbage, kerosene, and unwashed men. Our barracks smelled like the same thing, just with an extra layer of damp wool and American cigarettes. We had our routines. Morning, roll call, both compounds, count our guys, count theirs, check the locks, walk the perimeter, and tap the wire with a gloved hand every 10 yards, listening for the right kind of vibration. Day, paperwork, prisoner rosters, transfer orders, reports of stolen boots, traded bread, fights in the soup line. The sound of German and Polish and French weaving together into a fabric of argument and resigned laughter across the yard. Evening, roll call again, lights on, shadows cutting long and strange across the mud, the cough of generators, cigarettes glowing in the dark like little orange eyes, night guard rotations, 2 men to a post, 1 man in the tower, me with my clipboard and flashlight, moving from gate to gate, listening to the wires sing in the wind. The legend was something we joked about at first, if we mentioned it at all. Hey, Sarge, Kowalski said once, balancing his helmet on the back legs of a chair in the guard shack, while we thawed our hands over a little coal stove. You think that old witch was talking about St. Peter at the pearly gates, or some local crowd spook with a ledger? Don't start, Martinez said. Last time you tried to tell a ghost story, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I was talking about actual Japanese soldiers cutting ears off dead Marines, Kowalski said. That was a report from the Pacific. Not a ghost story. Same thing. Martinez poured black coffee from a dented pot, his fingers steady, even though the enamel rattled against the metal cup. I don't need any more crap in my head at 3 in the morning, I didn't ask what you needed, Kowalski said. I asked Sarge what he thinks. I thought about the carved stone, about the way the chain had moved under my hand, with no one on the other side of the gate, about the face in the greatcoat, wearing my friend's smile. I think we lock the gates and do our job, I said. If some crowd spirit wants to swap places with anybody, he can take my billet in this rain, and I'll haunt him from town with a dry bed and a bottle. They laughed. It was easy to laugh by the stove. Flames made their own reality. Outside the shack, the floodlights buzzed. The mud froze in ridges. Somewhere beyond the wire, a dog barked once and then stopped. Mitko. We got the order to move half the German guards 2 days later. Temporary reassignment, the lieutenant said, slapping the paper down on my clipboard with the same ink-stained fingers he used for everything. He was young, clean-shaven, hair slicked back, and his name was Lieutenant Frank Peters. The rumor was he'd been training as an accountant before the war. Some outfit in the rear wants to talk to them about something, higher level responsibility or some such. I don't ask. I just read what's on the damn page. How many? I asked. 13. He tapped a column of names. Pull them out of Compound C after evening roll call. March them to the trucks by the road gate. Hand them over to the escort detail. Sign the paper. Wave goodbye. Martinez leaned over my shoulder, eyes flicking along the list. Weiss, Rudy, he read. That the big one with the broken nose. That's him, I said. The former Oberfeldwebel, who had run the old Russian camp. We'd pulled his rank badges off his collar ourselves. He still stood like he had men under his boots instead of mud. Good, Martinez said. Maybe they hang him. Shut it, Peter said, but there was no real reprimand in his voice. He took his cap off and wiped his forehead. The room smelled like sweat and damp paper. Just do the transfers, Harper. The sooner we hand these guys over, the sooner we get rotated to something that isn't fencing. Roll call that evening felt wrong from the start. We lined the German guards up inside their compound, backs to the barbed wire, eyes on us. 2 Americans at the gate. 1 in the tower above, rifle on his lap, boots hanging over the edge. The floodlight washed everything flat, white and black. The men's shadows stretched behind them like they were trying to get out first. Weiss, Rudy, I called. Higher. His voice was deep, steady. He stared past me, his eyes hollow in the glare. Weiss had a way of not looking at whoever addressed him. He aimed his gaze somewhere 6 inches above a man's head, like he only spoke to rank. I checked his name and moved on. Kruger, Hans, Schultz, Dieter, Becker, Otto. One by one, the names on the paper found their matching mouths. I had done this so many times, the cadence was a song in my bones. When I reached the 13th name on the transfer list, I hesitated. Klein, Joseph, I said. There was a pause, not silence. Men shuffled. Someone coughed. A boot scraped. Higher. The voice came from the middle of the rank. Somewhere between Weiss and a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses whose nose had been broken twice in opposite directions. I moved my flashlight, squinting past steam breath. Klein, Joseph, I repeated. Higher. The same voice. The same place. I counted heads. Compared them to names. The numbers matched. The paper should have made the world solid. It didn't. There were 13 men on my transfer list. There were 27 men in Compound C. My mouth tasted like metal. Step forward if you're called, I said, and went down the line again, this time with a gesture for each name. Weiss stepped out. Becker, Kruger. One by one, 13 men left the rank and formed a separate column, facing the gate. Boots squelched in the mud. Shadows shifted. Klein, Joseph, I said. No one moved. I frowned, ran my finger back up the column, as if maybe the letters had changed when I'd looked away. They hadn't. I looked at the remaining men, searching their faces. There is a particular kind of stillness a lot of prisoners get after a while, a learned blankness. No expression, no eye contact, no sudden moves. It's how you stay invisible and uninteresting. Now, though, I didn't see blankness. I saw something tighter. The way a man looks when he hears distant artillery and isn't sure which side it's on. "Which one of you is Klein?" I asked. No one answered. Weiss's jaw flexed. The muscles in his neck stood out. His eyes flicked once, not at me, but past my shoulder, towards the outer gate and the road beyond. "He doesn't want to go," Martinez muttered next to me. Guess he heard a rumor. I turned. The wire behind the German guards quivered, not with wind. The air was dead calm. It shivered like something had bumped it from the outside, on the other side of the compound. The tower light buzzed. A moth threw itself against the glass, leaving a smear of powder. "Maybe there is no Klein," Kowalski called from the gate. "Paper's wrong. It happens, Sarge. You know that." Someone double-typed a name in the rear. "We got 27 men. We send 12. The trucks don't give a damn what their names are as long as the head count matches." I looked at the list, at the column of printed letters. Klein, Joseph. Frau Ritter's voice shifted somewhere in the back of my skull. "The ones with the rifles. The ones behind the fence. They change places." "We send 12, I said finally. I drew a line through the name and felt something tighten in the air, the way it does before lightning. As the guards marched past me, each man brushed against my sleeve in the narrow gate, shoulders damp, boots heavy. Weiss's eyes met mine once. There was nothing pleading in them. No gratitude. Just a kind of hateful amusement, like he thought he knew something about this hill that I didn't. "You should not have written him down," he said in low, accented English that had no business being that clear. "The man at the gate remembers every name, even the wrong ones." "Move," Martinez snapped, shoving him gently in the back with a gloved hand. Weiss stepped on, boots hitting the duckboards in perfect cadence. The escort trucks took them away in a spray of gravel and exhaust. The evening settled. The gate shut. The lock clicked. The sky over the hills turned a flat, dirty purple. The next night, the inner gate of Compound C would not open. We tried everything. Key, oil, muscle. The mechanism refused to budge. "It opened this morning," I said, my breath fogging in the beam of my flashlight. My fingers ached from cold and effort. "I walked through it at 0800. I stood right where you are, Kowalski. It was fine." "Yeah, well, it's not fine now," he grunted, shoulder braced against the iron. "Maybe the steel's warped. Maybe this whole place is sinking into whatever pit it crawled out of." We had prisoners, lined up on the other side of the wire inside the guard compound, waiting for soup and bread. The main compound had already been served. Men watched from behind their fence, faces pale in the floodlights. "Back away from the gate," I yelled in German. "Get away from the hinges." They shuffled back, the way men do when they know someone is about to start hitting something with tools. Harper. Martinez stood a few yards away, his face turned toward the far end of the camp. "You seeing this?" The outer road gate, the one we'd heard move 2 nights before, stood closed and chained. No one was near it. No truck idled outside. No German civilians. The muddy track beyond it stretched empty under the low clouds. The lock twisted once, on its own, turning so the shank faced outward. The chain shivered along its length, each link clicking softly against its neighbor, as if someone unseen had run a hand down it. The inner gate behind me shook like something had thrown its weight against it from inside. The impact rattled my teeth. "Get away from there," I shouted again, not entirely sure which side of the gate I meant. A voice spoke behind the German guards, flat, calm, too familiar. Higher, it was Klein, the voice from the previous night, the one that had answered a name we couldn't match to a face. It came from the center of the group, from a place where my flashlight showed only anonymous shoulders and caps. "Who said that?" I called. No answer. Metal screeched. The inner gate's lock gave up with a crack, the bar shooting back in its housing. The gate swung inward 1/2 inch, no more, as if pulled by a very patient hand. Martinez grabbed my collar and yanked me backward as the gate finished its swing all at once, slamming open with enough force to bounce off the wall and nearly flattened Kowalski. "You all right?" I asked, heart hammering. He picked himself up out of the mud, helmet askew, laughter bubbling out of him too high and too fast. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, Sarge, just." He looked up at the hinges. "Just glad that ghost likes you better than me." The German guards filed out for their meal, eyes flicking to the gate, to us, to the outer road gate, where the lock now hung loose, chain trailing motionless. We locked everything again. We checked and rechecked. We wrote it up in the log as mechanical failure and structural settling. No one wanted to explain why. When we drew the diagram for the day's report, the camp gates kept coming out backwards. The pencil scratched lines that made no sense, inner and outer reversed. Fences drawn in places they weren't. When I erased them, faint ghost lines remained, crossing the page like old scars. The war moved around us like weather. Reports came in of bridges taken, cities burning out, units shifting east to meet Russian forces, somewhere in the vague middle of the map. We stayed on the hill with our wire and our lists, and our gates that moved when they shouldn't. We lost our first man 3 nights later. His name was Private Michael Mickey Doyle, Brooklyn, New York. He kept his hair longer than regulation under his helmet and wore a rosary tucked into his shirt pocket, because his mother mailed it to him every month with a new letter that smelled like starch and church candles. He sang under his breath when he was nervous. Old Irish songs he'd gotten from his grandfather, and he had a habit of flicking the safety of his rifle on and off with his thumb when he thought nobody was watching. He was on gate 3 with Martinez, the one that separated the main prisoner compound from the back service yard where the latrine trenches ran. It was the coldest part of the camp. No stove, no shelter, just wire and wind and the smell of waste. I was halfway up the ladder to Tower 2 when I heard Doyle's voice. "Hey, that's not funny," he called. "Knock it off." I froze, one hand on the rung, one on the rail. The tower boards creaked under my weight. Above me, Dawson, the tower guard, shifted his boots. "What is it?" I shouted. I heard Martinez answer, but the wind carried his words away. The generators thumped. A dog howled somewhere far off, then cut off. I climbed faster, heart in my throat. From the tower platform, I could see the whole camp in a wash of yellow light and hard shadows. The prisoner yard, the guard compound, the road gate, the back gate, by the latrines. Gate 3 was open, not wide, just enough. A sliver of darkness where steel should be, a mouth starting to smile. "Christ," Dawson whispered. 2 figures stood on either side of the gap. Martinez on the American side, boots planted, rifle out of its sling, hands white-knuckled on the stock. Doyle on the prisoner's side, just inside the yard, standing rigid as if someone had nailed his boots to the ground. "Doyle," I yelled, back behind the wire. Now, he didn't move. Prisoners watched from the shadows of their shelters. No one rushed the gap. No one even leaned toward it. They hung back, eyes wide, like men watching a road where they'd seen mines laid. "The hell you doing, Mickey?" Martinez's voice cracked. "Get your skinny ass back over here." Doyle's head turned slowly, the way a man turns in a nightmare when his body won't obey his urgency. His eyes found mine in the tower light. They were empty and terrified at the same time. "I didn't open it," he said. "Sarge, I didn't." I heard the chain move, and then it was. It was just like this. His hand twitched toward the gate, then stopped. His rifle hung from its sling, barrel angled down, useless. "Walk away from the opening," I said, forcing my voice to stay flat. "That's an order, Private." Right now, he took 1 step back. 1. Then something invisible grabbed him by the front of his jacket and yanked. It was not a shove. There was no obvious force, no hand, no body, no visible impact. 1 second, Doyle was standing in the gap, his heel half on the threshold where the gate should have closed. The next, his chest snapped forward, in a motion so violent, his helmet flew off and skittered across the ground. His boots left twin gouges in the mud as he slid 3 feet deeper into the prisoner yard. The gate slammed shut between us with a clang that echoed off the concrete. Every man in that yard flinched backward at once. It looked like the whole compound had taken a step away from itself. Jesus Christ. Martinez threw himself at the gate, grabbing the bars and shaking them so hard his rifle strap bit into his shoulder. "Back off," I yelled. "Back, Martinez." He didn't hear me. Or he did, and ignored it. He rattled the gate, spit flying, eyes wild. "Mickey, open the damn thing. Open it." Doyle stood inside the yard, alone, in a circle of clear ground, the nearest prisoners 3 yards away. His face had gone slack. His lips moved around words that might have been a prayer, or might have been nothing. His fingers fumbled at the chain where it wrapped through the bars on his side. "There's no lock," he whispered, voice rising on the last word. "Sarge, there's no lock on this side." The lock hung on Martinez's side, perfectly closed, keyhole facing us. "Harper," Dawson's voice behind me. "They're going to stampede if you don't." The prisoners didn't move. They watched with the stillness of men watching a man lean over an open shaft. Doyle grabbed the bars and shook them. The veins in his neck stood out like ropes. His breath steamed. "Let me out," he panted. I didn't go in, Sarge, I swear. I was just standing here." Martinez clawed for the keys at his belt, fingers clumsy. He got the right one on the second try, jammed it at the lock. It turned smoothly, too smoothly. The shank slipped free. The chain sagged. The gate did not open. "Again," I said, not sure if I was talking to Martinez or myself. He tried again. The lock came off in his hand, chain falling away entirely, slapping against the steel with a flat, hollow sound. The gate refused to budge. On Doyle's side, the bars bowed inward, drawn tight by something pulling from inside the compound. His body was jammed against them now, cheek pressed to cold steel, breath coming in sobs. "Please," he said. "Please, please, please." His rosary was visible now, dragged out of his pocket by the way his jacket stretched. The beads dug into the skin of his chest. They looked like someone else's fingers. "Get the bolt cutters," I said. "Get Peters. Wake everybody now." I came down the tower ladder, in a controlled fall, hands burning, boots slamming on wet rungs. By the time I hit the ground, I could hear more than my own breath. A low sound, deep and resonant, like the hum of a distant engine, or a crowd mumbling in the next room. It was coming from the ground, from the posts, from the wire, from the gate. We got the cutters. We got the lieutenant. Men ran through the camp, boots slapping, belts clinking, floodlights swung. Shadows jumped. Doyle never left his spot. He never stopped trying to pull the bars apart with his bare hands. Even after the skin split and his fingers bled, his breath frosted the steel white. His eyes shone too bright. "Get back," Peters barked. "All of you, back. Give my men room." He was pale. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cold. He motioned to me and Martinez. "Cut the side hinges first. If that doesn't work, we go for the bars." I nodded, set the jaws of the cutter around the hinge bolt, and squeezed. The steel groaned. The sound under it changed, deepening, like something huge, turning over in its sleep. The hinge snapped. The gate moved an inch. Not away from Doyle. Not toward us. Up. It rose in its frame, bars scraping against the posts. Mud trembling at its base, as if the whole structure were being lifted by invisible hands. Doyle screamed. The sound cut through the camp like a flare. His feet left the ground. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Martinez whispered. Doyle's body hung an inch off the mud, pinned to the gate by pressure from the inside. His head jerked forward. There was a crack like a rifle shot. For a second, I thought someone had fired. Then I realized it was his neck breaking. His feet kicked once, twice. His hands let go of the bars as his fingers lost their grip. The rosary snapped. Beads fell between the wires like little pieces of bone. The noise in the ground cut off all at once. The gate dropped. Doyle's body slid down and crumpled at its base, half inside, half out. eyes staring across our boots at the dark strip of earth between compounds where no one ever walked. The prisoners didn't cheer. They didn't yell. They stood in their huts in shadows and watched silently as we worked his body free, as we tried not to look into his eyes, as we carried him away on a stretcher covered with a blanket that couldn't hide the wrong angle of his head. Someone whispered in German as we passed, a word I didn't know. Another voice answered with another word. Later, Martinez told me one of them meant debt, the other meant exchange. The report said accidental, death due to mechanical failure during duty. We all signed it. Even Peters, his hand shaking just enough to blot the ink. Frau Ritter came again the next day with a basket of bread that smelled like rye and ashes. She stood just outside the open gate and looked at the spot where Doyle had died. "You keep your men on the wrong side," she said quietly. "The hill does not like it. The old man does not like it." "There is no old man," Peters snapped from the guardhouse doorway. "There is faulty German engineering in men who don't watch their footing." She turned her head toward his voice, but did not walk closer. The wind lifted the ends of her headscarf. Her hair was thinner than I remembered. Or maybe it was the light. "You write their names," she said, "but you do not ask who wrote them before you." That night, we doubled the guard. We checked every link of chain. We wedged wooden blocks against the gates. We put sandbags in front of them. We told ourselves it would be enough. The hill kept its own tally. I started counting things I hadn't counted before. How many times a day the locks were touched. How many times the chain shifted without a hand visibly on it. How often men on gate duty said they heard voices calling roll in languages they didn't speak. We reassigned Gate 3 to a rotation of men who had never stood there when it moved. Superstition disguised as policy. Peter signed off on it with a tight jaw. "Whatever keeps you all from jumping at shadows," he said. "We're here to secure prisoners, not to swap ghost stories with the locals." Martinez refused to go near the back fence alone. "Laugh all you want," he told Kowalski, who still tried to joke about the whole thing. "You weren't the one standing on the side with the lock when Mickey went light as a feather. I could feel it, like the wind from a train passing. But there was no damn train." "Maybe you should go to mass more," Kowalski said. "Maybe you should shut up," Martinez answered. "No heat in it, only tiredness." The German guards watched all of this with narrow eyes. Weiss, especially. When we called their roll, now, he listened like a man hearing familiar music played slightly out of tune. "Harper," he said once, as I lowered my clipboard after a bitter cold morning muster. "You took a name from the list." "I crossed it out," I said. "There's a difference." He shook his head slowly. "No, you tried to change who was meant to stand where. That is not your choice. Men write orders. The hill does not care. The hill remembers what belongs inside the wire and what belongs outside it." "You're inside it," I pointed out. "How does that feel, Oberfeldwebel?" He almost smiled. "For now," he said. The big snow came a week later. It fell fast and thick, muffling everything. The camp shrank to a small island of light and breath in a world of white. Fences became lines of black ink on a paper that kept erasing itself. Bootprints filled in behind a man before he could turn and see them. I was out with a shovel, clearing the path to the gate shack, when I realized there were prints where no one had walked. They led from the road up to the outer gate, not truck tracks, not the stagger of a drunk soldier returning from town. Neat, regular steps, as if someone had marched in full kit, heel to toe, with parade ground precision. Martinez was already at the gate, staring down at them. Snowflakes clung to his eyebrows. His breath steamed. "See these?" he asked. "Maybe Peters came in early," I said, even though I knew his walk, and this wasn't it. "Or the supply sergeant." Martinez shook his head. "They're coming from the road," he said, "but they don't go back. Whoever walked up here walked straight into the gate and disappeared." The tracks stopped dead at the threshold. No scuff, no turn, no sign of a body climbing the fence. Just a final full print, toe kissing the bottom of the gate, and then nothing. It wasn't the lack of exit marks that made my stomach twist. It was the angle of the last prints. They weren't facing into the camp. They were facing out. Maybe they opened it and went through, I said. Snow filled in behind them. The locks still iced over, Martinez said. Nobody touched it. And look, he pointed. In the thin layer of snow that had settled on the chain, someone had traced a shape with a gloved finger. A circle, a line through it, a little cross at the bottom. It looked like the carved stone weed thrown back into the prisoner's yard. The same ring, the same notch. Who drew that? I asked. The chain shivered once. Snow fell in a soft patter. The mark blurred. We got word that afternoon that the front was collapsing faster than anyone expected. More prisoners were coming. Overflow units. Stragglers. Men in mismatched uniforms, with no papers and no clear chain of command. Our camp was slated to double in population in 48 hours. And where the hell are we supposed to put them? Peters demanded, slamming his hand down on the camp map. We've got no tents, no extra stoves. The latrine trench is all ready, sir, I said, pointing to a blank square inside the outer perimeter. We could open this area, clear the scrap, string another inner fence, make a compound D. He stared at the space, jaw working. That's right on top of the old foundations, he said finally. The Krauts had some kind of, what did the file say? Punishment field there. They used to string men up on posts. Better posts than nothing, Kowalski muttered. Fine, Peters said. Do it, but keep the guards separate from the enlisted prisoners. That's still policy. I don't want any their guards, I interrupted. We're keeping them, too. He looked at me like he didn't understand the question. Of course we are, he said. These guys ran labor camps. Some of them are wanted for questioning in war crimes cases. We don't just let them walk, I meant. I started, then shut my mouth. I had been about to say something about the hill, about Frau Ritter's warning, about Doyle's neck snapping against steel that refused to obey our hands. Policy was heavier than superstition. On paper, anyway. We cleared the old foundations in a rush. Broken posts, bits of rope, shards of ceramic insulators from electric lines that had once hummed with stolen power. The snow turned gray, with dirt and ash. In the middle of the square, we found a stone marker, half buried, and knocked it aside to make room for another row of stakes. Martinez spat on it before we dragged it away. Nothing personal, he told the rock. Just tired of your ugly face. It had a faint pattern on it, under the grime. A circle, a line, a cross, inside it. We built Compound D, we filled it. On the first night, after the new prisoners arrived, the guards moved. Not the German guards, the American ones. I woke to shouts. Boots on the barracks floor, the metallic rattle of weapons pulled from racks. I grabbed my belt and gun, buckled as I ran, breath burning my lungs with cold. The camp was chaos in contained form. Lights on, men running in straight lines, orders shouted in clipped phrases. No gunfire. Yet, Gate 2's locked from the inside. Someone yelled. Prisoners are, sir, the guards, there. I pushed through to the road gate first. It was closed, locked. Snow drifted up against it in neat piles, sculpted by wind that hadn't been there a minute before. The chain was taut, as if something were pulling on it from the other side. Compound C, Martinez gasped, grabbing my sleeve. His eyes were wide. He was sweating despite the temperature. You need to see this. He dragged me along the perimeter, past Compound B's, huddled men, past the skeleton outlines of tents in D, to the fence around C. German guards stood behind it, lined up in rows, hands gripping the wire. Their faces were white masks in the floodlights. Their breaths smoked in unison. They did not shout. They did not move. Every man inside wore an American helmet, our helmets, with our names stenciled faintly on the back rim. Christ, Kowalski whispered beside me. That's my pot. He was right. The front rank of figures had a shell with Kowalski painted in smeared black. Next to him, Martinez, 2 down. Doyle, I stared. My scalp prickled beneath my own helmet. Their uniforms, I said, field gray. German cut, German belts, German boots, American headgear, American names. Our gear on their skulls, like trophies. They were empty 2 minutes ago, the private on duty stammered. I swear, Sarge, I did the check. I turned around when the light flickered, and when it came back, he gestured helplessly at the fence. The men in the compound stared at us with our own eyes. Not doppelgangers, not perfect copies. Just something about the way their mouths held, the set of their brows. Something's moving in there, Martinez said softly. Underneath them, I listened. The ground hummed. The same low, vibrating sound we'd heard before Doyle died. It thrummed up through my boots, into my bones. I'm going in, Peters said behind us. His voice was high and brittle. Open the gate. Now. That's an order, sir. That might not be. That's an order, Corporal. The inner gate to Compound C stood slightly ajar, like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. The lock lay on the ground, chain unhooked. Peters stepped inside. The rows of figures did not move. They watched him. Weiss watched him. His helmet said Peters in faint, scratched letters. Who did this? The lieutenant demanded. Who took my men's gear? Who thinks this is a joke? No one answered. Prisoners in the neighboring compounds murmured in their own languages, words I couldn't catch. Sir, I said with my throat dry, maybe you should step back out here. We can handle it. From something clanged at the outer gate at the same instant. A lock slamming shut, hard, final. The floodlights flickered, once, twice, long enough for shadows to slide like oil, for faces to blur, for the world to feel one step misaligned. When the power steadied, the fence lines had changed. The American guards were inside Compound C. I saw my own face behind the wire. Not a double, not a ghost, me. Same jaw, same scar on the chin from when I'd slipped off a truck back in Rouen. Same expression I knew I wore when a sergeant chewed me out and I didn't want to let it show that it hurt. He wore field gray, my helmet. Harper in black stenciled letters on the back. His hand gripped the wire exactly where mine did on the other side. Jesus, Martinez breathed. Sarge. He reached for me. For him. For something. Peters stumbled backward out of the gate. His face was white. He tripped over the threshold and fell, hands scraping in the snow-mudded earth. Close it, he gasped. For God's sake, close it. We slammed the gate. The lock snapped into place with a will of its own. The chain pulled taut, as if something had grabbed it and yanked from inside. My reflection tilted his head. The gate between us shuddered. I stepped back. My breath came fast. This is some kind of... Peters swallowed. There was spit at the corner of his mouth. They're messing with us. Sir, I said, not taking my eyes off the man behind the wire wearing my helmet. Weiss is in there. He's in there with them. He can stay there, Peters snapped. We backed away slowly. No one turned their back on the fence. The men inside did not move from their rows. But as we walked, their heads turned to follow us, like one body with many faces. All that night, the camp perimeter held. The gates stayed shut. The ground hummed on and off, like a heartbeat. We posted extra men at every entrance. We forbade anyone from entering Compound C in the morning. C was empty. No German guards. No American doubles. No helmets on the ground. No footprints in the snow inside the wire. Just a patch of earth that looked as if it had been walked on by many feet for many years and then smoothed over by a patient hand. Our own guards reported for roll call at their barracks. All present, all accounted for. No one remembered standing behind the wire. No one remembered seeing with my eyes from the other side. Doyle was still dead. His bunk was empty. His rosary beads lay in a neat circle on his pillow, though I knew I'd seen them snap and scatter at gate 3. His name on my roster had a thin, faint line through it. One I did not remember drawing. How many men are assigned to Compound C, Corporal? Peters asked me in his office that afternoon. His voice had the steadiness of a man pretending very hard. The blinds rattled against the window in a wind that didn't touch the trees outside. 27 German guards, sir, I said. Plus 1 American on tower duty per shift, and 2 at the gate. Were assigned, he corrected. They've been reassigned upstairs. Higher authority took them. He handed me a new sheet of paper. A transfer form. 13 names, then 14 more. Then a blank. No one came, I said. No trucks, no escort. There's nothing in the log. He smiled, without humor. Higher authority, he repeated. Not my department. I just signed the forms. The blank at the bottom of the transfer list had a faint impression, like someone had pressed a name there and erased it before the ink dried. If I tilted the paper into the light, I could see the letters. Klein, Joseph. We kept the camp running, because that was what we were trained to do. Men in uniforms receiving orders from other men in uniforms. Gates, lists, wire, food, water. The machinery of captivity doesn't stop because something old and unseen takes an interest in one little hill. More prisoners came. We filled Compound D. Then we filled the space between the compounds with makeshift shelters. We built triple rows of wire along the outer perimeter. At night, sometimes, I heard roll call being read in the dark, beyond any fence. Names and languages I didn't speak, in orders and cadences that didn't match any army manual. I heard men answer, present, absent, here. Once, when I walked past Compound B, in the early hours of the morning, I saw Doyle's helmet sitting on a post inside the wire. Frost outlined his name in white. I opened the gate myself. I walked in. The prisoners watched me, eyes dull. None of them moved toward the helmet. I picked it up. It was cold all the way through, like something had burned the warmth out of the metal years ago. When I brought it back to our barracks and set it on his empty bunk, it was wet. Maybe you should bury it, Martinez said. And maybe you should stop walking near the fences alone at night. You afraid of a little German folk tale? Kowalski tried to joke, but his voice didn't land where it used to. Old man at the gate. Come on. Martinez stared at the helmet, jaw tight. I'm afraid of lists, he said. I'm afraid of names on paper. I'm afraid of being counted by someone who doesn't give a damn if I'm on this side of the wire or that one. We got the order to stand down a month later. The surrender had been signed. The war in Europe was over. There were more flags in the streets now. More music in the towns. More drunks. More laughter. Our work shifted from active containment to processing and release. Most of these guys are going home, Peters told us in a briefing that smelled like damp wood and coffee. The lower ranks, the conscripts, the guys with no blood on their hands, at least none we can find in the papers. Command wants to show the world we have no interest in keeping them longer than we have to. We're the good guys. What about the guards? Someone asked in the back. Peters hesitated. Some will be held for trials, he said. Some will be released. Some have disappeared into other channels. Higher authority, Kowalski muttered. Enough, Peters snapped. We're closing this camp. We hand it over to the French in 6 weeks. Until then, we keep the gates locked, the wire intact, and the names straight. No more incidents. He looked at me when he said it. I didn't blame him. When the first batch of prisoners marched out under the outer gate toward repatriation, some of them crossed themselves as they passed the post. Some spat, some hurried, some slowed, eyes flicking to the locks like they wanted to memorize every scratch. One man, a thin former rifleman from Cologne, who'd once traded me a carved pipe for a pack of cigarettes, paused and touched the gate with 2 fingers. You should get away from this place, Corporal, he said in broken English. The war is over, but the camp is not. It's wire and mud, I said. It'll come down. They'll build something else here. A factory. Houses. He shook his head. Wire or walls. It is the same. There is always a gate. And someone to write the names of those who go through. The last prisoner left that day, just as the lights started to go. The road beyond the camp twisted down the hill and vanished into the trees. For the first time since we'd arrived, the inner yard was empty. No voices, no movement, just wind and the low clink of chains settling. We stood by the outer gate and watched the column disappear. "Feels strange," Martinez said. He shoved his hands into his pockets, shoulders hunched. All that noise, all that stink, and now, nothing. "Better than the alternative," Kowalski said. The lock on the gate turned under my hand. I hadn't touched it. "Did you see that?" I asked. "No," Martinez said, "and I don't want to." "Close it, Sarge. One last time. Let's get our orders and get out of here before whatever keeps moving, that thing decides it wants us to stay." I swung the gate shut. The chain looped itself the last few inches. The padlock popped into place like a magnet. When I pulled on it, it held. That night, I dreamed of rosters, not of dead bodies, not of gates slamming or wires humming, just columns and columns of names on pages that had no edges. Names I knew, names I didn't. Some with ranks, some with numbers, some with nothing but a place beside them where a mark could go. In the dream, someone else held the pencil. When I awoke, the light in the barracks was gray. The stove was cold. My breath smoked. There was a list on my chest. Not paper. Wood. A section of old board, grained dark with age. Lines scratched into it with something sharp. Names burned into it with a hot nail. Letters crude but legible. Some were in German, some in Russian, some in languages I couldn't read. At the bottom, in fresh, darker strokes, were newer names. Doyle, Michael, Harper, Thomas, Martinez, Leonardo. The space beside my name was blank. The one beside Doyle's had a mark. A cross, tilted slightly, cut deep. The stove flared as someone lit it. Heat rolled through the room. When I blinked, the board was gone. On my chest, the outline of its weight remained, a pressure I could still feel when I touched my uniform. I didn't tell anyone, not about the board, not about the names. We had orders. We followed them. 6 weeks later, we marched out. We stood in formation one last time, inside the wire. The French commandant took the keys from Peters with a cigarette between his fingers and a shrug. "Old camp," he said in accented English. "Old ground. We will put fresh wire, new guards, new names. Good luck," Martinez muttered. We walked through the outer gate as a unit, boots on duckboards, packs on backs. The air felt heavier under the arch. I could almost hear Frau Ritter's rosary clacking somewhere in the distance. On the road, I turned once. From that angle, the camp looked different. The inner fences seemed taller, the gateposts older. For a second, just 1 second, I thought I saw men in field gray, watching from behind the main compound wire. Not Germans, Americans. Helmets, with our letters. Faces turned toward the road, as if waiting. The blink of an eye, then they were gone. "Come on, Harper," Kowalski called. "Stop sightseeing. We got a truck to catch." I faced forward and walked. Years later, long after another war, after other gates and other names and other uniforms, I found myself driving through that part of Germany again. Civilian car, civilian clothes, visitors' papers in my glove compartment. The road signs had changed. The towns had grown. The wire was gone. "There's an old camp near here," my guide said. "A man young enough to be my son." It was German, then American, then French, then just empty. They built a factory on part of it. The rest is a memorial now. People come to put stones and flowers on the fence. "Do they lock the gate?" I asked. He laughed. "Of course," he said. "You cannot just let people wander in. It is dangerous. Old ground, holes, rust." We went, out of some stubborn need, some itch I couldn't ignore. The factory hummed beyond the trees. The memorial stood on the old hill, a neat, quiet place. Fences of new wire, plaques in 3 languages. Names, always names. The outer gate stood open that day. Wreaths hung on it. Ribbons fluttered. Children ran between the rows of posts, playing some game of chase that sent their shadows leaping. I walked to the threshold. My right foot stepped over it, without hesitation. My left stopped. The air changed at that line. warmer, oddly, thicker. I could smell boiled cabbage on a breeze that should have carried only exhaust and damp leaves. I could hear the low murmur of men at roll call, answering to numbers that weren't theirs. Old ground, my guide said again. Many stories. There was a board mounted on a stand near the entrance. A list of the camp's known dead. Germans, Russians, Poles, French, Americans. No ranks, just names and dates. At the bottom, someone had left a space. For ones yet to be found, the text said. I ran my finger along the blank. For a moment, I felt wood under my hand instead of smooth metal. Rough, splintered, warm. Someone cleared his throat behind me. Excuse me, the caretaker said in German. We're closing soon. The gate must be locked before dark. I nodded and stepped back over the threshold. He swung the gate in. The chain snaked through the bars. The lock snapped. I felt the hill exhale. On the drive away, we passed a side road that twisted up toward the factory. There was a small, weathered sign at its base, half obscured by ivy. The paint had faded, but I could still make out the letters. Torwalk, Gate Watch. Do you believe in ghosts, Herr Harper? My guide asked, suddenly, eyes on the road. I thought of Doyle's hands on the bars, of Weiss's calm gaze, of Frau Ritter's rosary, and the carved stone and the board on my chest, with my name burned into it. I believe in gates, I said, and I believe in lists. And the man at the gate, he asked, half joking. I watched the rearview mirror as the hill disappeared behind us. For a second, I saw a figure standing at the bend where the camp gate would have been, wearing a coat that didn't get wet, holding a board and a pencil that never went dull. He raised his hand. I did not wave back. If you think the fence is what keeps you safe, you haven't been paying attention. Stay close. There are other stories where the gate swings the wrong way, and the names don't stay where you put them. Remember this hill. The wire may be gone, but the count is still running.